My name is Anna, and I'm 28 years old. 3 years ago, my family publicly humiliated me at my sister's wedding. They called me a failure. They threw me out in front of hundreds of guests. And they made it very clear that I wasn't welcome. What they didn't know was that less than an hour later, the groom would refuse to marry my sister. And the reason would leave everyone speechless. To understand what happened, you need to know something about my family. In my family, success wasn't measured by kindness. It wasn't measured by character. It wasn't measured by hard work. It was measured by money. And according to my parents, I had failed. My younger sister, Madison, was the golden child. Beautiful, popular, confident. Everything she did was celebrated. When she graduated college, my parents threw a huge party. When she got engaged, they rented an entire country club for the announcement. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs to pay my own tuition. I built my career from scratch. I rented a small apartment and carefully saved every dollar. But because I wasn't rich, my achievements didn't matter. At least not to my parents. Whenever relatives visited, my mother would brag about Madison. Then she'd eventually mention me, usually with a disappointed expression. Anna is still figuring things out. Or, we just wish she had bigger ambitions. The truth was, I worked harder than anyone in that family. But nobody cared. Especially my sister. Madison loved reminding me that she was more successful. Every promotion she got became a family celebration. Every achievement of mine became an afterthought. After years of this treatment, I stopped trying to impress them. I focused on building my own life. And honestly, I was happy. Or at least I thought I was. Then Madison got engaged. The wedding immediately became the biggest event our family had ever planned. My parents spent nearly a year preparing. Every conversation became about flowers, venues, decorations, guest lists. The wedding consumed everything. At first, I was excited for my sister. Despite our differences, she was still family. I wanted her to be happy. But as the wedding approached, something strange happened. Madison became increasingly obsessed with appearances. Not just the wedding. Everything. The photos. The guests. The image she wanted people to see. And somehow, I became a problem. One afternoon, about a month before the wedding, she invited me to lunch. At first, the conversation seemed normal. Then she leaned forward. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." She hesitated. Then finally said it. "Do you really need to come to the wedding?" I laughed. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "I don't understand." Madison looked uncomfortable. "It's just..." She paused. "The wedding is going to be very upscale." I stared at her. And she avoided eye contact. "I don't want people asking questions." Suddenly, I understood. She was embarrassed by me. My stomach dropped. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I stood up, paid for my coffee, and left. I hoped that would be the end of it. Unfortunately, it wasn't. A week later, my parents called. They wanted to discuss the wedding. The moment I arrived, I knew something was wrong. Both of them looked nervous. My father cleared his throat, then said the words I'll never forget. "Maybe it's best if you skip the wedding." I couldn't believe it. My own parents supporting this. My mother quickly added, "It's not personal." Not personal. As if excluding your daughter from a family wedding could ever be anything else. I felt humiliated, angry, heartbroken. But eventually they backed down. Mostly because several relatives found out what was happening and criticized them. Reluctantly, I remained on the guest list. The wedding day finally arrived. The venue looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers, luxury decorations, hundreds of guests. Everything Madison had dreamed of. I wore a simple navy dress. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. I just wanted to support my sister and avoid attention. For the first hour, things were surprisingly peaceful. Then disaster struck. Or at least that's what my family thought. One of Madison's wealthy friends approached me during the reception. We started talking. The conversation was pleasant, normal, until he asked what I did for work. I told him. I explained that I managed operations for a growing logistics company. The friend seemed impressed. Unfortunately, Madison overheard part of the conversation and somehow twisted it into something else. Later that evening, I discovered she'd been telling guests I worked as an assistant. Apparently, she didn't want anyone knowing I held a management position.
Why?
Because it didn't fit the narrative. The narrative where she was successful and I was a failure. When I confronted her privately, she exploded, accusing me of trying to steal attention, accusing me of making her look bad. The argument quickly escalated. Then my parents got involved. And instead of calming the situation, they took Madison's side. As always, my father pointed toward the exit. "If you can't support your sister, leave." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Several nearby guests turned to watch. The room suddenly felt very small. My mother crossed her arms. "You're ruining her wedding." I felt my face burning with embarrassment. Hundreds of people, watching, judging, whispering. Then my sister delivered the final blow. "You've always been jealous of me." That hurt more than anything, because it wasn't true. I wasn't jealous. I was tired. Tired of being treated like I mattered less. Tired of being blamed for everything. Tired of spending my entire life trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for my response. Instead, I simply nodded, picked up my purse, and walked toward the exit. Nobody stopped me. Not my parents. Not my sister. Nobody. As I reached the parking lot, I felt tears running down my face. I sat inside my car and stared through the windshield. Part of me wanted to drive away. Part of me wanted to disappear. Then my phone rang. The caller ID shocked me. It was Ethan, the groom. I answered immediately. "Hello." His voice sounded strange, tense. "Anna, where are you?" In the parking lot, there was a long pause. Then he said something unexpected. "Stay there." "What?" "Just stay there." The call ended. 10 minutes later, chaos erupted inside the venue. Guests began flooding outside. Groups formed. People whispered frantically. Nobody seemed to know what was happening. Then one of my cousins came running toward me. Her face was pale. "Anna, what happened?" She looked stunned. "Ethan refused to continue the ceremony." I froze. "What?" "He won't say I do." For a second, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Apparently, shortly after I left, Ethan asked where I had gone. Someone explained everything. The confrontation, the humiliation, the accusations, everything. And Ethan became furious. What nobody knew was that he'd witnessed similar behavior for months. Small moments, comments, cruel jokes, subtle insults directed toward me. At first, he assumed he was misunderstanding. But after hearing what happened that night, everything clicked. The wedding stopped. Completely. Guests sat in stunned silence while Ethan requested a private conversation with Madison. That conversation lasted nearly 40 minutes. Nobody knows exactly what was said. But when they returned, Ethan looked devastated. Madison looked furious. Then Ethan made an announcement. He couldn't marry someone who treated people the way she'd treated her own sister. The room went silent. 150 guests. Complete silence. Then he walked away. Just like that. The wedding was over. The reception ended early. Guests left. Vendors packed equipment. Years of planning collapsed in a single evening. Over the next few weeks, the truth became even uglier. Several friends later contacted me. Apparently, Madison had spent years creating a false image of herself, manipulating people, exaggerating achievements, looking down on anyone she considered beneath her. The wedding incident simply exposed it publicly. Ethan eventually ended the relationship completely. My parents blamed me at first. Of course they did. But eventually even they couldn't ignore reality. Too many people had witnessed what happened. Too many questions were being asked. Too many truths were finally coming out. 3 years have passed since that night. I rarely speak to my sister. Our relationship never recovered. As for Ethan, we never became friends. But a year later, he sent me a message. Only one sentence. "Thank you for showing me who she really was." I still think about that sometimes. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I enjoyed watching the wedding fail. I didn't. Honestly, it was heartbreaking. But sometimes people spend years hiding who they are. Then one moment reveals everything. My family threw me out of my sister's wedding because they thought I was a failure. They humiliated me in front of everyone. They expected me to quietly disappear. Instead, that night exposed the truth. And in the end, the person they called a failure walked away with her dignity, while everyone else lost the perfect image they had spent years trying to protect.